So what's going on? What's going on? Listen, hope everybody had a good Monday evening. You know, Mondays are the opportunity to start your week off on the right foot, put yourself in position to be successful.
Together, we help more people feel protected and secure because we're all protectors.
For whatever reason, a lot of people take Mondays as the most difficult day of the week. But for me, Monday is the opportunity to set your week off on the right foot, get things together, make sure that you're preparing yourself properly to do the things that you need to do. So I embrace Mondays. So hopefully everybody had a good week. But listen, I'm going live just because for a few reasons. But the main reason is, if you watch my videos, you understand what I talk about. You understand that my focus is wealth, specifically black wealth. And how do we improve our circumstances? How do we better our circumstances? How do we change our circumstances in a way that not only improves ourselves financially, but improves the other things that are a part of our community that are connected to the finances, connected to the wealth, but hold a deeper purpose than just money. And I don't know if you pay attention to the news, but the markets got killed today. The markets were down 2.5, 3%. Uh, for the year, the markets are down anywhere from 14 to 20%, depending on what index you think about. And a lot of that is based on the fear of a potential recession. And, I think we've gotten too comfortable in the past, I would say, 5 to 10 years. We've gotten used to things being available, used to money being flowing freely, used to capital being accessible. And I don't know that we necessarily understand why that is. But if you've been to the grocery store lately, you see that prices are up everywhere. Anytime you put gas in your car, you see that prices are up everywhere. And those things don't just happen by accident. They happen purposefully. Anytime there is an inflation of prices, that affects the economy. Anytime there is an increase in interest rates, that has an effect on the economy. And so the landscape and the climate that we've gotten used to over the past 10, 12, 13 years, a lot of that stuff is coming to an end. We've gotten used to this free-flowing, free capital, cheap money, low interest rate environment where it was easy to go and buy a car for 0%. It was easy to go and get a mortgage on a house for 2.5, 3%. And those days are changing. It's not like that anymore. Money is about to tighten up. Money is about to dry up. It's not going to be as easy to buy a vehicle. It's not going to be as easy to finance a home. It's not going to be as easy to go out and establish a credit base and get thousands and thousands of dollars in available credit if you don't have your financial life in order. And so, more than anything, I think we need to be preparing for that, not only financially, but we need to be preparing for that intellectually and mentally. And, one of the things that bothers me is the direction of a lot of the conversations that we're having, specifically when it comes to money, when it comes to wealth. A lot of those conversations are foolish conversations. They're surface conversations. They're not addressing the problems. They're not addressing the issues. They're not addressing the things that are actually going on in our community. And I have a problem with that because this is what I deal with every day. Um, one of the greatest people that I've ever known in my life, somebody that influenced me greatly, somebody that was a leader in the community, somebody that came from nothing and built himself up. His name was Robert C. Blake Sr. If you're from New Orleans, Louisiana, if you're from the South, you probably know him. You've probably seen him. You've probably heard his influence. He passed away about 9 years ago. But I was fortunate enough that he was my godfather. He was my uncle. And he had a deep and substantial influence on my life. Again, this is a man that came from nothing. He built himself up. He was a businessman. He was a pastor. I watched him build his church up from just a few hundred members to thousands and thousands of members. I saw how he treated people in the community. I saw how he gave money out of his own pocket. I saw how he took time to really help change people's lives. And so he was somebody that I looked up to. He was somebody that I admired. He was somebody that I seriously respected. As a matter of fact, I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and, I grew up in a time where you basically had to make a decision if you wanted to live the street life or not. And while all the other people were choosing to go that path and to live the street life and to make those decisions, I was looking up to this man because he was so influential. And I was fortunate enough because I was related, because, I spent time with him outside of being just in church. I was able to see how he lived his life outside of that. And one of the things that I recognized was that all of the people that people looked up to in the street, all of the gangsters, all of the guys that was in the street that everybody wanted to emulate, that everybody wanted to be like, they would come to him for advice. They would come to him for guidance. Those same guys that everybody feared, that everybody, people that impose their presence in the street, in the neighborhood. Those are the same people I was seeing in his office crying, looking for a second chance, looking for a way out. And so that had a big influence on me, because while everybody else was choosing that path, I was seeing who those guys respected, who the guys from the street respected. And so that made me want to be more like him than the people in the street. And I'm not saying I wasn't influenced by that as well, because I was, but I had a different vantage point. I had a different view. And so I was able to see them in their weakest moments. And so that made me make a decision to choose a different path. And I'm getting off topic, but, growing up in the church, you get exposed to things, and you are able to see things as a young man that kind of help shape your life. And one of the things that Robert C. Blake Sr. said that I'll never forget, it stuck with me throughout my whole life. And, I was a kid. I didn't really listen to sermons that much, You just don't know how to pay attention. But there was one particular sermon on one particular day that stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I'm paraphrasing at this point. But what he said was, if you want to change the direction of a tree, if you want to change the course, if you want to change the health, if you want to change the trajectory of a tree, you don't shake the branches, You don't clip the leaves. You attack that tree at the roots. And for whatever reason on that day, I just happened to be listening to the sermon. But that stuck with me. That principle, that idea stuck with me. It stuck with me. And it actually carried me through my life because it made me recognize, not only with a tree, but with anything in life, any conversation about change, about growth, that does not include dealing with something at its roots, at its source, in my mind, that's equivalent to clipping branches or shaking leaves. And so I've always believed that if you want to change anything, you have to attack the roots. And actually, my company is named Attacking the Root. That's how much that message resonated with me throughout my life. And so ever since then, I've just had this core belief that if you want to change something in your life, you can't clip the branches. You can't shake the leaves. You have to attack the roots. And so when I see people talking about problems in society, talking about issues in society, talking about circumstances in society, and especially in the Black community, and all of their solutions are surface, all of their solutions are superficial, all of their solutions are cosmetic, I know that they are not addressing the issue. They are not attacking the root. All of the solutions that they talk about are just clipping branches or just shaking leaves. And so I feel obligated to call those things out. And so if you listen to the way that I talk about things a lot deeper than just those surface issues because it bothers me. We don't get anywhere. If you listen to some of the conversations that we talk about the problems in our community today, they are the same conversations that we were talking about 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, in some cases, 50 years ago. Because we are only dealing with the surface. We are only shaking branches and clipping leaves. But nobody wants to attack the root. Nobody wants to deal with the issue. Because to deal with the real issue, you got to dig deep. And when you dig deep, it's painful. When you dig deep, it's hard work. When you dig deep, it's introspective because you have to actually look in the mirror and self-reflect. You can't detach yourself from the problem. You got to be honest with yourself to deal with the core. And so today I want to dig deep and I want to talk about real issues that are going on. And, I spent a whole lot of time thinking about the things that are going on in our community and some of our biggest problems, whether it's crime in the prison system, whether it's the financial issues and the financial irresponsibility, whether it's the deterioration of the family unit, whether it's drugs, whether it's mental health. All of these things are harming and hurting our community. And the way that most people talk about them is from the surface. And I think that's true for a couple of reasons. I think, number one, people just don't want to deal with the issue. Because it's easy to say or recognize things that are happening, but it's much more difficult to look in the mirror and ask yourself how you're contributing to the problem. And I'm Generation X. I was born in the late 70s. I'm a Generation X baby. So I think I have a different perspective, or my generation has a different perspective on life than other generations. Most people in Generation X, we are what I call the hip hop generation. Generation X is the hip hop generation. We grew up on hip hop. We are the generation that created hip hop. And if you think about Generation X, we're the first generation post civil rights movement. And after the civil rights movement, there was integration. And there was this big push to integrate societies. And for the first time, we were able to go into white neighborhoods and eat at white restaurants. And we were trying our best to integrate society and move past Jim Crow, move past civil rights, move past slavery. And so my generation was really the first generation to start doing that. But there was an element of the Generation X generation that was rebellious. There was an element of that generation that did not want to participate in the integration of society because we didn't trust it. And that element that didn't want to integrate, that element that wanted to stay separate, that element that wanted to rebel, that's where hip hop was created. That's where the hip hop culture was created. Whether it was dancing, whether it was music, whether it was DJing, whether it was rapping, whether it was the way we dressed, that culture was created out of the rebellion of Generation X from the civil rights era. And so most people my age, I'm in my early 40s, or most people younger than that or older than that grew up on hip hop, we saw it from its infancy. We saw hip hop when it first started in its rawest form, when it was just somebody beating on a drum or was somebody just beating some sticks on a bucket and people were just flowing and rapping into it in neighborhoods. That's what we grew up on. And so most people in Generation X have an affinity for that because that brings back a nostalgia of how we grew up. That brings back a nostalgia of what we remember about hip hop in its purest form. Most people I know in Generation X, they don't really listen to hip hop the way it is now because we've seen it evolve into something that we don't recognize. Generation X dealt with the crack in the 80s. We dealt with the crime in the 90s. We dealt with 9/11 in the 2000s. And through all of that, we saw it from the vantage point, and I'm specifically talking about the Black community. We saw it through the vantage point of hip hop because that's where we grew up. Right? That's where our foundation was built. And so I don't think it's a stretch to say that in the past 40 years, the hip hop culture that we grew up on, that has become the predominant culture of the Black community. See, in the beginning, hip hop was outcasted. It wasn't mainstream. It was just something that was birthed into our culture. And so I think it's safe to say at this point, hip hop culture is Black culture. What I mean by that is, if you're a Black person and you don't really represent or resonate with hip hop, it's almost like you're an outcast. It's almost like you're separate and apart. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the way it is. And so I think it's safe to say, and I don't know that anybody would debate me on this, hip hop culture for the most part is Black culture. And that's all good up to a point. Because like I said earlier, hip hop was built on rebellion. It was built on the idea that we didn't want to participate in this new system, this new integration. We didn't want to participate in this thing that was going on, so we were going to do our own thing. But the problem with rebellion is that you need power for it to be effective. And at some point, I don't know the exact time, but I can tell you the time frame. At some point in the 90s, that culture was hijacked from us. And it was used against us. See, in the beginning, we created it. We manifested it. We controlled it. We controlled the message. We used it to communicate with one another. We used it to be able um, to represent our culture to the world. But at some point, it was hijacked from us, and it was taken from us and used against us. And if you think about the transition from, hip hop that was diverse, and you had conscious, and you had fun, and then you had, gangster rap, and you had romantic, and there were all these different options.
Because we're all
Um,
protectors.
and at some point, that message was hijacked from us. And when it was hijacked from us, it was used against us. And I don't know that anybody, I've heard people allude to this. I've heard people talk about this in bits and pieces, but nobody has ever really truly, nobody's ever really truly, what's the word I'm looking for? Communicated about it in a way that created some understanding about how it's affected us. But at some point, hip hop was hijacked from the black community and used against us. And now, I don't think it's a stretch for me to say, mainstream hip hop, culturally, even though it's a part of black culture, the message is a message of destruction. If you listen to the true message right now of hip hop, it is a message of destruction. And I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that. I'm trying to be cautious with my words, just not because I don't want to offend anybody, but because I want to be clear in what I'm about to say. Because I don't want to be hypocritical. I listen to that. I grew up on it. I still listen to hip hop. It's a part of my life, but I understand it for what it is. And I know how powerful music can be. And if you listen to a message over and over and over and over again, you start to believe that. It starts to resonate with you. You start to take on the form of that message, and you start to filter everything that you think about and see through that message. And when you hear it over and over and over again, year after year after year, you start to see the world through that message. And if you think about the message of hip hop, once it took its direction and change, especially in the 90s when the term gangster rap became the predominant form of hip hop music. And if you listen to the messages in the mid 90s and today, 25, 27, almost 30 years later, they talking about the same stuff. They're talking about the same stuff. And the things that they are talking about are counterproductive to advancement in our community. And so it's not a stretch for me to say that the message that hip hop represents is in direct conflict with what it takes for the black community to change their circumstances. And that's why I say it's all cap. It's all lies. It is all of a side. It is all cap. CAP. Capitalism and pleasure. That's the decision that we've made. That's how hip hop destroyed wealth in the black community. Capitalism and pleasure. See, I'm a capitalist. I'm all for free markets. Capitalism is based on a free market society, free market competition. If you have an idea and I have an idea, we get together, we compete, and whoever has the best product, that's who wins. And then other people can join the market to provide competition. And what happens after that is you continue to get innovative, you continue to grow, you continue to enhance your product, and that helps society. There's nothing wrong with free market competition. Free market competition has allowed us to create financial circumstances in our community that we've never seen before. But there's a problem when you mix capitalism and pleasure. It's almost like a faucet. See, when water comes out of a faucet, it's free flowing. Anybody can get to the water. But if you don't get to the water, if you don't take the water that you need, then it's going right back down the drain. And that's what's happening in our community right now. Money is free flowing. There's more opportunity than ever to make a living, to make money. There are more options than ever. Right now, the black community controls $1.3 trillion in spending power. But it's going right back down the drain. The money's going in our pocket and right back out our pocket at the same time. We're not protecting. We are not preserving. We're not thinking about our futures. We're not taking what we need to grow, to expand. It's coming out the faucet and it's going down the drain. And that is because we made a decision that's all cap. Capitalism and pleasure. We have chosen to follow the hip hop culture down the path of destruction. And so while at the same time, we have more opportunity financially than we've ever had, we have a mindset and a mentality of destruction. And so we're destroying everything that we create at the very same time. Just like a faucet is free flowing, but if you don't get the water that's coming out the faucet, it's going right down the drain. And so we have this big faucet of opportunity, and all of that opportunity is going down the drain. Because we've made a decision to allow hip hop to become the predominant culture. And in the beginning, like I said earlier, hip hop was based on rebellion. But now it's based on some other stuff. So let me be clear to what I'm talking about. Let's be clear. What does hip hop represent at this point? What does it represent? What does it represent? Does it represent anything productive? Let's talk about it. What does it represent? What do they talk about? I'm going to give you 5 themes that represent the hip hop culture right now. 5 themes that represent the hip hop culture. I don't think it's debatable. The first thing is money. We've become money hungry as a society. If you listen to any rap song, I don't care if it's conscious, I don't care if it's gangster, I don't care if it's a love song, they are going to reference money. And listen, there's nothing wrong with money. But when money becomes the primary target, you become willing to compromise all of your integrity and all your values to get it. And so now we live in a society where as long as money is the end result, anything goes. As long as it's just about getting to the bag, then our actions have no consequences. As long as we don't get caught for things that we do and it results in a financial gain, that's all that matters. And to me, that's what hip hop culture represents. It's money. Not wealth, but money. Not wealth, but money. It's not about value. It's not about purpose. It's just about getting to the bag. We all want to get to the bag. But I said this a few weeks ago. Don't get the bag, produce the tree. See, the bag is not connected to anything. The bag represents short-term riches. The bag represents a come up. It represents a lick. Once you get the bag and it's not connected to anything, then what happens when the bag runs out? You have to do something else to get another bag. That's short-term thinking. That is detaching value from money. And that's the mindset we have a lot of times in our community. We all want to get to the bag. That's short-term thinking. Don't get the bag, produce the tree. Don't get the bag, produce the tree. See, the tree represents wealth. You cannot have a tree without planting a seed. And when you plant a seed, you have to do more than just plant that seed. You have to cultivate it. You have to nurture it. You have to water it. You have to take care of it. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes energy. It takes focus for that seed to expand itself, to plant its roots in the ground, and to sprout up and to grow and to produce fruit. But once it becomes a fully productive tree, that fruit can feed you season after season after season. But we don't have that kind of patience. Because in our community, it's all about just getting to the money. And so we don't care about the source. We don't want to take the time. We don't have the patience. It's all about getting to the money. But when that happens, when you have that kind of mindset, it becomes easier to trick you. It becomes easier to scam you when it's just about the money because you're not thinking about long term. That's why we get scammed so easy in our community. Don't get the bag, produce the tree. Money is a main thing in hip hop culture that is in direct conflict with our advancement in our community. It cannot just be about the money. It has to be about wealth. It cannot just be about money. Another thing that's predominant that has destroyed wealth in the black community, that is a direct representation of hip hop culture, is sex. We don't value relationships. We don't value commitment. We don't value principles. We don't value one another. We value physical pleasure. That's why I say it's all capitalism and pleasure. Again, any rap song that you turn on the radio and they're talking about sexual frivolity, making bad decisions. Listen, we adults, right? I can talk about that. We are adults. We're going to make decisions as adults. But when all of your decisions are based on your pleasure and not your purpose, not your people, not your family, but just your pleasure, you're bound to make bad decisions. And so now we're in a circumstance where we have 2 generations of single parent homes. We have young people now that don't even see the validity or reason to get married or to have any type of long-term relationships. We have circumstance now where we specifically seek pleasure and fun and not purpose. That's a direct result of the hip hop culture. And nobody wants to say anything about it. Rappers can get on and talk about All of their escapades, they can be disrespectful to anybody they want to. They can just say the most ridiculous and crass things, and we support it. Society supports it. And we just let it go by. And so while we're trying to fight all of these things that are going on in our community, the crime, the drugs, all of these different things that we're dealing with, the financial circumstances, all of this stuff that we're dealing with, how can we do it honestly if we are constantly feeding our minds with negative image, negative explanations, negative connotations? How can we do that? How can we change our mindset to build wealth when we're being told to be wasteful? How can we change our mindset to talk about generational wealth when we're constantly being told to seek pleasure? It's all capitalism and pleasure. Talked about money. Talked about sex. What else? I don't think we understand how powerful music is. I don't think we understand how powerful music is. When you listen to something over and over and over again, it becomes a part of your subconscious. When you listen to degrading music about women over and over and over again, it becomes a part of your subconscious. You listen to music about getting money over and over and over again, it becomes a part of your subconscious. Do you think that has a positive or negative effect on our community? Money, sex, wasteful consumerism. That's another theme that's prevalent in almost every song that you can think of. It's prevalent in the hip hop culture. Wastefulness, buying things that you don't need with money that you don't have to impress people that you don't like. That's why for the last 30 years, rappers have been talking about buying Gucci, buying Louis Vuitton, buying all of these name brands that they have zero ownership in, spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that they've worked for to buy things that mean nothing. And that's fine if that's what they want to do. But it has trained us to seek out those same things. And so now we don't even feel validated. We don't even feel accepted by society unless we are wasteful with our spending, unless we buy things that we know we don't need and cannot afford. That's why every time I go in the mall and I pass by the Gucci store, there's a line wrapped around the entire mall just to get in. Now, if I know just the basic math of economic numbers and knowing that only a small percentage of society makes a certain amount of money, then I can just do the math and understand that most of the people in this line cannot afford anything that's in that store. But we've been trained to think that that's okay. We've been trained to say, hey, who are you to judge? You can't tell people how to spend their money. Who are you to judge? But see, my problem with that is we can make judgments about society in general. And we can say, man, I don't like this about society. I don't like that about society. I don't like that society does this. I don't like that we live in a society where this happens. It's okay for us to say that because now we're detached from it. But what we can't say is, what am I doing individually to contribute to that problem? What are you doing individually to contribute to that problem? And when I look at numbers like we have $1.3 trillion in spending power, and yet the average black family has a net worth of 17,000 compared to 170,000 for white families, I should be able to say we need to change our priorities. I should be able to say that we should not be spending all of our money on frivolous luxury goods. I should be able to say that it doesn't make sense to spend $5,000 on a bag or $2,000 on shoes. I should be able to say that that's foolishness. But that's what we've been fed over and over and over again. If you go and listen to hip hop music for the last 30 years, they have told us we need to have Gucci. We need to have Louis Vuitton. We need to have Fendi. We need to sip Cristal or Ace of Spades. We need to fly on private jets. We need to drive in this kind of car. We need to drive in that kind of car. We've been fed this over and over and over again, and that mindset is in direct conflict with wealth in our community. And I challenge anybody to debate me on that, because I work with wealthy people every day. Every day. For the past 22 years, I work with the people that we see memes about. The wealthy do this, the wealthy do that. This is what wealthy people buy. This is what wealthy people invest in. People say all kinds of stuff. I work with these people every day. I advise them on how to invest their money, on what to do. I learn about their families, about their priorities. I understand how wealth is built. And it is in direct conflict with this mindset that we have to have all of these luxury items and goods. If you're not making $500,000 a year, you do not need a $500,000 purse. Period. If it's more than 1% of your salary, you don't need a Rolex watch. But we have to break away from this culture that tells us that we need that. This culture that reinforces that we need to look a certain way, that we need to have certain things to be validated. Money, sex, wasteful consumption, drugs. We talk about drugs so much. It's just amazing to me that our situation isn't even worse than what it is. Hip hop culture and drug culture, in my mind, are synonymous. Whether we're selling drugs or we're taking drugs, we accept that as just a part of our culture. And nobody says anything about it. It's all cap. We've been told to seek pleasure, capitalism and pleasure. Money for pleasure purposes, sex for pleasure purposes, wasteful consumption for pleasure purposes, drugs for pleasure purposes. You can't build wealth and seek pleasure at the same time. Wealth is not about short-term pleasure. So if you have that kind of mindset, you're never going to build wealth. We promote drugs and it's all good. We don't say anything about it. Rappers that openly and admittedly take all kinds of drugs, we give them awards. We put them on interviews and TV shows. We ask their opinion. We take their advice. We put them in leadership positions, and nobody says anything about it. And we wonder why we are leading ourselves down a road of destruction. We've been knowing almost for 40 years at this point that drugs were pumped into our community. It's documented. We've been knowing it for 40 years. So at this point, I don't want to hear anything about a conspiracy. Because a conspiracy happens when you don't know about it. See, a conspiracy sets the environment, it sets the landscape, but you don't know that the landscape is being set, and then you make a decision. So in the 80s, I get it. In the 90s, I get it. We didn't recognize, we didn't have the information, we didn't know any better. So all of a sudden we have drugs in our community. You know what? There's no opportunity, so let's go sell drugs. You know, there's no opportunities. I don't know what to do. You know, we get hooked on drugs. But now we have 40 years of information, 40 years of the crack epidemic, of the crime bill, of the prison pipeline system. We have 40 years of evidence of destruction in our community, and we still talking about selling dope? We still talking about selling drugs? We still promoting taking drugs after all of that evidence of how they destroy our communities. And we still accept that. And nobody says anything. Money, sex, drugs, wasteful consumption. What's the last theme in hip hop? Violence. Violence. It's okay for us to accept killing one another. In the past 5 years, I can't even tell you how many rappers have been killed. More than I can even name. And yet every song that we hear, somebody dies. And we just supposed to accept that because those artists are making money off of that music, that their message is okay. And at the same time, we got our young men and women dying every day. And the music is constantly reinforcing that that's okay. Kill, kill, kill. Murder, murder, murder. And listen, I'm not trying to act like I'm separate and apart because I grew up on this. I listened to all of that. But I got to a point in my life where I understood this is not good for me to put into my system every day. And I did a video, I did multiple videos on this, talking about the clear message that the person that hurt you cannot heal you. And initially, when I talked about it, I was talking about individuals, right? When you get hurt by somebody, when somebody does you something, physically, if somebody cuts you with a knife, the minute that that knife comes out of your body, it is powerless to healing that wound. The same knife that caused the damage is powerless to healing the damage. And that's because healing doesn't happen on the outside. Healing happens from within. Once you get cut, your body replenishes itself. It re-energizes itself. Your skin forms around that wound and it starts the healing process from within. And so, if that's true physically, it's also true mentally and emotionally. If we've been hurt physically, emotionally, the person that hurt us can't heal us. Whether you've been hurt by your parents, where somebody betrayed you, somebody broke your heart, the moment they do that, they are powerless to heal you. No matter how many times they apologize, you have to heal from within. You have to heal from within. And that is true on an individual basis. But it is also true as a community and as a culture. And we all know the history of the things that have been done to our community. I just talked about some of them. We know about Iran Contra and how they used drugs in the black community to fund the war. We know about the crime bill and how millions of black men and women were sent to prison. We understand about redlining. We know about Jim Crow and segregation. We know all of these things that were done to us. But the person that hurts you cannot heal you. And so we look at all of these things that were done, and now we take stock of what's going on in our community right now and the things that are happening in our community right now. And like I said earlier, I hear people having conversations about these problems, and all of the solutions are surface issues. They shaking branches, they clipping leaves, but nobody wants to attack the root, because the root has nothing to do with the government. It has nothing to do with more funding. It has nothing to do with the police system. It has nothing to do with anything outside of the community. The person that hurt you cannot heal you. And if we want to fix the problems that are going on in our community, that's going to start with us. It's going to start with our mindset, with our mentality, with our priorities, with our values. That's how that's going to change. But we have to be able to be willing to take a stand and talk about these things and take back control of our own community. Because right now, we have allowed this hip hop culture, which is not the culture that it originally started. This is a culture that has been manufactured. And I want to be clear about that. This is not a culture that we started. Hip hop was started off of rebellion. People that wanted to rebel against a system that they did not trust. And that music was used to communicate among one another, to educate, to inform, to express. But once the culture was hijacked from us, it became a culture to destroy. And that's why the primary themes of hip hop are sex, drugs, wasteful consumerism, and violence. And we talk about these things like they don't matter. Every other day, a rapper gets killed. And we just go on about the business like nothing happens. No, we don't say anything about it. Nobody's stepping up and challenging this. But I have a problem with it. We have to take a stand on that. And see, what happens to our young people is it becomes confusing. Because on one hand, you hear these rappers' lyrics, and they talking about drugs and money and guns and sex and violence, and they doing all of these things that we know are wrong. We know they are. But then we see those same rappers get congratulated to go to the White House. We see those same rappers invited to go to the White House, to get on panels. We see those same rappers ask their opinion about society. And then we take those words as law. When the politicians are looking for somebody to influence, they don't come and get the most educated of us, the most informed of us, the ones that want to progress and grow. When they want to communicate to our community, they go to the same people who are talking about killing our community, the same people who are talking about destroying our community, the same people who are talking about frivolously wasting all of the resources in our community. Those are the people that we give a platform and a microphone to, and nobody says anything about it. And that's why I say it's all cap. It's capitalism and pleasure, and that is our destruction. We have a free market society to go and earn anything that we want to earn. The opportunity is there. But now we have a culture that promotes the destruction of that. And it's just like water coming from the faucet and going right out the drain. The water from the faucet represents more opportunity than we can even get our hands on. But the culture that we promote and that we live in represents a drain that is wasteful, that is destructive. It's draining resources that we'll never see again. Why is this important? Because society is changing. The world is changing. We've gotten used to things being free. We've gotten used to things being cheap, but that's not going to happen no more. We're going to have to start paying for our mistakes. And if we don't put ourselves in a position of power, if we don't put ourselves in a position of purpose, if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, it's never going to be there again. But in order for us to do that, I hate to say it, but we have to go against the hip hop culture. We have to. There is no choice. This is nothing personal against rappers. I listen to all of that music, like I said. When I'm in the gym, I get hyped up. When I go out hang with my friends, it's all fun. But I'm old enough, I'm mature enough to understand that that message is destructive. That's why I don't let my children listen to it. It's destructive. For a long time in my youth, I lived by those messages, and it almost took me down a path of destruction because I thought that that was the way to live. But this culture that has been hijacked from us and turned against us to destroy us has created a circumstance where we're wasteful with our money, where we don't value our bodies because we put anything and anybody in it, and where we don't value the life of other people. That's why we have no feelings whatsoever when somebody dies. We don't say anything when a rapper gets killed every other week. I don't even see preachers talking about death and murder anymore. I don't see anybody in our community admonishing. Hello, how you doing? You know, and this is my first time going live on YouTube. You know, I post a lot of videos, but I'm going live because this is a message I think we need to talk about more, because this is absolutely affecting our progress as a community. Because on one hand, we have more wealth available to us than ever. Our community has $1.3 trillion in spending power. We're more educated than ever. We have higher incomes than ever. And all of that opportunity is coming out the faucet and it's going right down the drain because we're destroying ourselves with bad financial decisions, with bad life decisions, with bad decisions about our body, with wastefulness. We're wasting our resources. We're wasting our money. We're wasting our body. We take a casual approach to drug use, a casual approach to sex, a casual approach to how we spend. And we think that that's not going to come back on us. That's why we have $1.3 trillion in spending power and an average net worth of only $17,000. And it bothers me because I see real wealth every day. Every day I see what real wealth looks like. And it's not that difficult to get. But you have to have a mindset for it. And that mindset requires sacrifice. It requires patience. It requires purpose. But we throwing all of that down the drain for short-term gain. And that's why I say it's all cap. Capitalism and pleasure. And so we got to change it. We got to address it. We got to deal with it. That's my message. Hopefully y'all have a good night, and I'll see you next time.